Hello, this is Dr. Darleen Wodzenski with Orchard Human Services, uplifting lives by counseling, educating, and caring. And I'm here to talk with you today about how stories transform trauma. My first experience with healing through stories happened when I was a child dealing with some significant distress. I remember discovering the C.S. Lewis books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It opened my eyes to a whole new world, and I experienced joy through reading those texts that I had never had for years. Later on, I discovered other books by Madeleine L'Engle about the Time Traveler series, and then I read the classics. I remember reading Jane Eyre or Gone with the Wind, and I knew that books really had the power to heal. But it wasn't until I worked with children with trauma and abuse backgrounds that I realized that books had the ability to do even more. We started to study the technology of how the brain can overcome trauma. Sequentially, as we recall memories of traumatic events, we add to those memories. For example, if you remember your 5th birthday, you know that however old you are, you've had so many years of birthdays in between. So you don't remember just your 5th birthday. You remember that you had a 5th birthday and then maybe another 10, 20, or in my case, another 55 more since then. And the same is true with trauma history. Sometimes people are frozen in their trauma memories and they don't want to think about them. They don't process them. And when those memories come up, it's in a painful and intrusive way. And suddenly they're frozen in time. They're triggered to have a panic attack or have anxiety, sweats, tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep, screaming out with flashbacks or nightmares. That's trauma frozen in time. But by telling our story and giving it new meaning and having it move us forward to a bright and compelling future, we can overcome our trauma histories and not only no longer suffer from them, but turn it around and use them as tools for creating a better life for ourselves and others. We started to see the work happen with children when we would write therapeutic fairy tales. So many children that we worked with had been through things that were so dramatic and traumatic that there wasn't a book out there for them. We wanted to read them a story, something that helped them give meaning and make sense out of what they'd been through, but there was nothing there. So I started writing stories for them. And then we noticed an amazing thing. The stories helped the children process. And then as they read the story over and over again, each time they learned something new and they added something new to the way they remembered the story. So they might say, well, I know that I was born into a family who didn't take care of me, and I was cold and I was hungry and I wasn't fed. But now I'm with a family who feeds me every day, and I have plenty of warm blankets and lots of clothes and people who love me. And suddenly that trauma memory takes on a whole new meaning. It winds up becoming bigger than the bad thing that happened. And it represents the fact that humans can overcome and move forward into a bright and compelling future to create a world better for themselves and for others. And one of the most amazing things is that even little children who've learned to overcome their trauma histories are able to share the way they did it with others. I have seen so many times where children whom I've worked with to help overcome their trauma history will get in a conversation with an adult who's having a bad day or dealing with a rough situation. And the child will sit there and explain, well, this is how you get control of your thoughts, and this is how you deal with your feelings, and this is how you use your words to work things out. So children are amazing. And if children can do this, so can adults. After a while of writing stories for the children, I gave it a shot one day. I said, what would happen if I started telling these stories to the adults? So an adult would come in and they would talk about some horrific thing that had happened to them in their childhood. Something so awful that you really couldn't make a movie about it because it wouldn't be fit to air on TV or show in a movie theater. But I'd write a story. I wouldn't go into detail. We'd talk about the terrible thing. We'd acknowledge that it was a sad day, a bad year, a rough time. But then we'd talk about the days that came after, and how the child or the adult learned to overcome. They found new ways to solve problems. They found ways to calm their sad heart and to lift their spirits. And little by little, the people developed the capacity to wrap their trauma history in layers and layers of happy and meaningful thoughts until they had an entirely new perspective on the thing that they had gone through. Instead of there being crumbled pieces of a shattered childhood on the floor, tripping them up as they tried to move forward, people instead cemented these trauma memories into a foundation that was solid and strong and lifted them up. And they were able to climb up on them and go higher and go farther and do more with their life than they had ever imagined possible. And much like a steel maker takes metal, puts it in the fire, and then cools it down and quenches it in water, the trauma history has the same way of strengthening our soul. An individual who's gone through something traumatic, challenging, devastating, and who found a way through and slowly began to process the memory, have the courage to feel it, tell the story, share with others, all of a sudden starts to develop the capacity to transform that story, not into something that's a source of pain, but into something that's a source of inspiration and a tool for making the world a better place. We tell stories in written form. Sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's rap. We sing stories. We write the lyrics and we put them to melody and rhythm. There are many stories that are handed down over time, fairy tales, myths, legends. It's amazing. And then there's the story that happens in dance and the creative performing arts. There are so many ways that human beings cathartically work out their tragic experiences through the expressive arts in order to heal. And as they do it, they're sharing their experience with others. And I think that's where the true magic happens. If I tell you my story and you listen, for just that moment, we shared something that was outside of ourselves. And we both walk away a little bit more than who we were before we had the experience. As children write stories and draw pictures of their own traumatic history and share them with others, they get to tell their story. They get to feel comfort and encouragement and hear about others who went through difficult things themselves. And suddenly, instead of there being one traumatic event or one traumatic year in a child's life, suddenly the child has some trauma memories and some trauma experiences in their past, but they're suddenly weaving into their life threads of hope and inspiration, strategies, resources, ideas, friendships, support. We can entirely remake the significance of a story and an experience and turn it into something that gives us more life, more joy, more fulfillment. Here at Hearthstar Festivals, all the performers are expressing their lives. Some of them are expressing joyful experiences, and I know quite a few are healing themselves through song and dance and creative expression. Listen for a moment to the beautiful flute melodies of Allah and see if you can feel the healing moving through the air as the sound waves pass through your ears. The senses are powerful forces in our lives. Listening to that beautiful music changes me, and every time I hear it, I'm just a little bit different and a little bit better than I was before. And if we listen to beautiful, haunting melodies like that, as we think about a trauma history, we're reminded that beauty still exists, music still lives, and we can still go on to have another day. And not all music is spiritual in nature. Take this next amazing song by our producer, Stella Laura. Her group, Stella and the Finns, recorded Take the Time. Take a listen.
I took a walk down my street last night. Not a sound anywhere. Stars are shining bright on me, and I'm glad to be here near my home. Near my home. My family, they're the ones I love.
The beat, the melody, the harmonies, they all work together and create an experience. Our brain literally vibrates in synchronicity to the music. We create new neural pathways to represent the experience of hearing the music. And if we're listening to music as we're remembering and reprocessing a trauma history, all of a sudden the music becomes part of the memory, just like the memory becomes part of the music. And again, we are not the same as we were before we heard the music. And other forms of creative expression are just as healing. Take a look at how Maggie uses dance to transform her life and those of her clients from young to old.
Come on, get up and move with us. Go ahead and do it. There's nothing to it. Let the music move you. Come on, get up and move with us.
Dance and movement is just as healing as song or written words. And the technology of how stories and creative expression heal us is, well, very scientifically based. As we have a sensory experience, whether we're seeing or hearing, feeling, or sensing our way through a story or a song or a dance, our brain is recording that new experience. And if we are thinking about, talking about, or explaining a history of trauma or an experience that was upsetting or devastating, while we're having that sensory experience, our brain is now recording an experience that was greater than just the trauma itself. The problem with trauma is that some people get frozen in time. It's too overwhelming. They feel that they might lose their mind. They might lose a bit of themselves. And for some people, that might be true. We do need to provide proper therapeutic support for individuals dealing with traumatic history. But with the proper support and love and patience, anyone can work through their trauma history and add new strands to the fabric of their lives, weave in new experiences and thoughts and ideas. Instead of feeling that they were a hopeless, innocent child who was totally victimized, they may recognize that they were innocent, they were a child, and they were a victim, but that they have overcome, and that now as an adult, they have the incredible power of insight and compassion for the suffering of others. And that as adults with a trauma history who have survived and overcome, they now are empowered, enriched, and ready to make the world a better place. So many of the most talented therapists, teachers, healers are individuals who themselves healed through a trauma history. There's something about healing through trauma that makes us just better. We're better people. We're better to ourselves, better to others. We understand compassion because we lived through the depths of devastation and suffering. Nobody has more compassion than someone who's walked in your shoes or in a similar pair of shoes. So how can we use stories? Well, we tell them with purpose. We surround ourselves with people who love us. We get professional support when we need it, and we move through. We have the courage to face the memory and to realize that it's only going to feel really scary the first 1 to 20 times. But then that next time, it's going to be a little bit less intense. There'll be a little bit less pain or negative emotion. We might feel a little less panic or anxiety. And one day we can even go so far as to take over control of our dreams. Some people wind up suffering horrible flashbacks and nightmares as a result of a trauma history. But I and many people have learned how to even take on the trauma history in dream time. I remember being in the midst of a dream that wasn't going well and stopping and saying, wait, I'm the dreamer. I'm the one who's the source of this dream. And I'm not going to have it end this way. Humans have been healing with stories since the beginning of time. Fairy tales, myths, legends, even songs that are passed down from generation to generation that represent the way people make new meaning out of a tragic or tumultuous history, and then share information and strategies for moving forward with success. So tell your story, share it with others, celebrate the music and the song and the dance at this festival, and then bring these ideas forward with you and to your loved ones. Be ready to work through your trauma history, give it new meaning, and wrap each of those traumatic memories in 1,000 happy ones that happened after. And you'll never be able to look back with regret again. You will only be able to look forward with the knowledge and the wisdom that you are a survivor and a thriver, and that you have not only overcome, you have excelled and gone beyond your wildest expectation. This is Dr. Darleen Claire Wodzenski, sharing with you how stories have the power to transform trauma. Find us at orchardhumanservices.org. Tell your story and heal your heart.